You have probably already heard that Freemasonry is full of symbols. But very few people realize that two of the most important symbols in the entire Masonic tradition are simply two pillars. Their names are Jachin and Boaz. At first glance, they appear to be just architectural elements described in the Bible during the construction of the Temple of Solomon. But for initiates, philosophers, and students of esoteric traditions, these pillars represent something far deeper. They are a symbolic gateway to knowledge that has traveled through thousands of years, connecting ancient temples, mystical philosophies, and modern spiritual traditions. The story begins in the Hebrew Bible, in the first book of Kings, chapter 7. There we find the description of the Temple of Solomon, one of the most important sacred structures in the ancient world. According to the text, two large bronze pillars were placed at the entrance of the temple. One was called Jachin and the other Boaz. What is fascinating is that these pillars were not structural. They were not supporting the building. They were symbolic markers placed at the threshold of the sacred space. The names themselves already reveal something interesting. Jachin can be translated roughly as "he will establish," while Boaz can be understood as "in strength." So even at the literal level, the message is already there. Establishment and strength, stability and power, foundation and force. For many biblical readers, this might simply sound poetic. But within esoteric traditions, symbolism is rarely accidental. Freemasonry, especially from the 17th and 18th centuries onward, adopted the Temple of Solomon as one of its central symbolic frameworks. Masonic lodges symbolically recreate the temple, not as a physical reconstruction, but as a philosophical model of inner development. And right at the entrance of that symbolic temple stand the two pillars, Jachin and Boaz. Many Masonic scholars have written about this symbolism. Albert Pike, one of the most influential Masonic thinkers of the 19th century, explained that these pillars represent fundamental polarities that exist throughout the universe. In other words, they are not just historical references to ancient architecture. They represent cosmic principles, and this is where things start to get really interesting. When you begin comparing Masonic symbolism with other esoteric traditions, you start noticing the same pattern appearing again and again. Two forces, two columns, two principles balancing each other. In Hermetic philosophy, there is the principle of polarity. Everything has two poles, two complementary aspects. In the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, there are two outer pillars, the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity. One represents expansion, generosity, and creative force. The other represents discipline, structure, and limitation. Between them stands the middle pillar, which represents balance and consciousness. Many esoteric scholars, including Dion Fortune and Israel Regardie, pointed out that the symbolism of Jachin and Boaz strongly mirrors these Kabbalistic pillars. One pillar represents active force. The other represents stabilizing force, creation and structure, expansion and containment. When I first understood this connection, it completely changed the way I looked at the symbol. Because suddenly, those pillars were no longer just part of an ancient temple. They became a map of how reality itself seems to operate. And interestingly, this dual symbolism appears in many traditions that are much older than Freemasonry itself. In ancient Egyptian temples, initiates often passed through monumental columns before entering sacred chambers. In various pagan traditions, sacred gateways were represented by twin stones or pillars, marking the transition from the ordinary world into a sacred space. Even in classical mythology, you find the idea of twin pillars marking the edge of the known world, like the famous Pillars of Hercules. Helena Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society, wrote extensively about how many symbols preserved in Freemasonry were actually fragments of much older initiatory traditions. According to her interpretation, these symbols survived because secret societies and initiatic orders preserved them across centuries, passing them from generation to generation. Within a Masonic lodge today, The pillars of Jachin and Boaz are usually placed near the entrance of the symbolic temple. Their presence represents the threshold between two states of being, the outer world and the inner world, the world of ordinary perception and the world of self-knowledge. When a candidate begins their journey in Freemasonry, the symbolism of crossing the threshold between these pillars represents the beginning of a transformation. It suggests that true knowledge requires passing through a symbolic gateway, not a physical doorway, but a psychological and spiritual one. Albert Mackey, author of the famous Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, emphasized that many Masonic symbols were designed to teach philosophical lessons through imagery rather than direct explanation. The pillars serve exactly that function. They silently communicate the idea that wisdom is found not in choosing one extreme, but in learning to balance opposing forces. In practical terms, many initiates interpret Jachin and Boaz as a reminder of inner equilibrium. Life constantly moves between expansion and limitation, action and reflection, strength and stability. Without balance, one force eventually destroys the other. In my opinion, this is where the symbolism becomes surprisingly practical, because when you look closely, those pillars are not only outside of us in temples or rituals, they are also inside us. Every decision we make reflects some form of polarity. When to act and when to wait. When to push forward and when to create structure. Many experienced practitioners in esoteric traditions use this symbolism during meditation or reflection, imagining themselves standing between two pillars as a way to center their thoughts and regain balance. And this raises an interesting question. Between these two principles, establishment and strength, structure and force, which one do you feel represents you more right now? Are you someone who tends to expand outward, pushing forward with energy, or someone who naturally builds stability and structure? First, I am genuinely curious to know your answer, so write it in the comments. Do you feel closer to Jachin or to Boaz? Another fascinating detail is that many people outside of esoteric studies have seen these pillars without even realizing it. Variations of the twin pillar symbolism appear in tarot imagery, especially in cards connected to sacred knowledge, like the High Priestess, who sits between two columns representing duality and hidden wisdom. This repetition across traditions suggests something profound. Symbols survive for centuries not just because they look interesting, but because they express patterns that human beings keep rediscovering. And maybe that is why the pillars of Jachin and Boaz remain so powerful today. They remind us that the path of knowledge is not about choosing one side of reality over the other. It is about learning to walk consciously between them. So the next time you hear someone mention the pillars of Solomon's temple, remember that they were never just decorations. They were markers of a deeper teaching, two pillars standing at the entrance of a temple. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that they form a gateway. And perhaps the most important part of that idea is this. Every sacred gateway is also a test, a reminder that wisdom begins when we step beyond the surface of things. And maybe the real temple those pillars guard is not made of stone at all. Maybe it is the one each of us slowly builds within our own consciousness. Before we finish, I want to ask you one more thing. Did you already know about the deeper meaning behind Jachin and Boaz, or was this your first time hearing about it? Let me know in the comments, because discussions like this always reveal fascinating perspectives from people studying these traditions around the world.